Okay, I'm going to call the Residential and Manufactured Structures Board meeting of January 8th, 2025 to order at 9:35 a.m. Katie, would you please call the roll?
Sean Blair,
Present.
Jason Sawyers,
Present.
Matthew Lutter.
Here.
Thank you. Emily Kemper.
Here.
Thank you. Chris Wong
Here.
and Chair Rich Fry.
I'm here. Thank you.
We should be having Abraham Kelso and Douglas Lethin coming soon, and James Austin and Forrest Barnes is excused.
Okay. And they can just join in then. All right. Okay, you guys gonna bear with me? This is my first time, so we'll try to make this as smooth as I can. So the board agenda, if there are there any changes to the agenda or the order of business? Okay. Approval of the draft minutes. Is there anyone that has any changes? And if not, could I get a motion to approve the draft?
I move to approve the minutes.
Okay. Do we need a second?
Chair Fry, you do not need a motion for the minutes.
Okay.
You can just rule that the draft minutes are final from October 2nd.
Okay. So I will rule then that that the draft minutes from the previous meeting on October 2nd are approved. The next date for our meetings will be April 2nd, 2025. All right. That takes us on to public comments. Ian, policy analyst, are there any public comments?
Perfect. Thank you, Chair Fry. Ian Paik, analyst with the division. We did not receive any requests for general public comment. However, I would like to take a moment just in case there's anyone online that would like to provide general public comment to the board. Seeing and hearing none in our Zoom, that concludes general public comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Residential program update. Tony, will you take that?
Yep, I got it. Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. For the record, Tony Rocco with the division. First here this morning on the program update, as you may have heard and may have seen, we had the statewide wildfire hazard map from ODF released this week. That map will eventually become part of our Oregon Design Criteria Hub. For those of you that have used the hub, it's a very exciting tool that we're excited about, and it basically gives you all of your site design criteria at the property level. And so that map will eventually be incorporated into that, later on once it becomes finalized. And then we're also going to be adopting the R327 provisions of the current ORSC as required by Senate Bill 762 to be applicable to all areas which are located within the wildland urban interface of the WUI and mapped as high hazard. So that's a key piece there for moving forward on the mandatory application of R327. You got to meet both of those things, right? So it's got to be properties located within the WUI and then mapped by that statewide ODF map as being high hazard. And there'll be then those provisions, those additional construction standards that we know of in R327 will apply mandatorily to those areas. And this process will occur later this year, and it will be at a future board meeting. So this board will be involved in that process of making those provisions mandatorily applicable instead of, you know, what they have been since 2019, which is optional provisions for a local municipality to adopt. Additionally, later this year, we'll be introducing the Housing Advisory Production Office, the HAPO manager, from the land use side of things to this board and to other advisory boards. So the DLCD HAPO manager is Joel Madsen. And we've had the pleasure of collaborating with Joel over the past couple of months, and we'll be bringing him to not only this board, but also the Building Code Structures Board, and then a couple of other advisory boards to introduce Joel. And with that, I just a brief update for the board this morning. As always, I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have. Otherwise, I'll turn it over to Mark Heizer for an energy update. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. Mark, do you have an update for us?
Thank you, Chair Fry. Just waiting to see if anyone had questions for Tony first. But yes, Mark Heizer with Division, giving an update from the energy program perspective. Wanted to first let people know that you can find on the energy program page a link to the embodied carbons and building materials report. The legislature in 2023 wanted the division to present a report on options to reduce greenhouse gas emissions attributable to building materials in a legislative report that has been issued. And there are links to both the executive summary and the full report, as well as a technical report from the Rocky Mountain Institute and New Building Institute that served as sort of some guidelines and research for our final report to the legislature. Also want to point out that on the residential energy code program page, we do have a complete new 3-part series of technical resources for building officials, but would also be helpful for anyone else looking to comply with Chapter 11 of the residential code. There's a general energy basics presentation, a presentation on plan intake and plan review, as well as was just posted an inspection process presentation as well. Again, the residential page has a lot of helpful materials that could also be looked at any time, and that will do it for the energy side report. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to take any. Thank you, Chair Fry.
Any questions for Mark? Okay, if not, we'll move on to number 4, communications. Tony, you want to bring us up to date on the Oregon Manufactured Dwelling Installation Specialty Code?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Chair Fry, members of the board. Again, for the record, Tony Rocco with the division. What you'll see in your packet here for this agenda item is anticipated timeline of adoption. And I believe that we're seeing that shared maybe on the screen here.
We are.
Okay, good. And so what we have here for those of you that follow along with the OMDISC, it is an older code that we have from 2010. And so this is outlining the anticipated timeline for updating that code. It's been a long time coming. We have some folks also attending this meeting in the audience. I see Rich Bauman. This is a code where we have to have a HUD review associated with it, right? Because it's a setup code for manufactured dwellings, and so there's going to be some additional steps, in there. You'll see that this timeline kind of summarizes all of that. It also summarizes the anticipated engagement from this board. So at the April meeting, April 2nd, 2025, there you see the third item down. And then as well as in July, you see that the anticipated code review committee recommendations coming back to this board, similar to what we would do for the residential code, but in this case it's for the OMDISC, or the dwelling installation specialty code. So a long time coming, something that some folks at OBOA have asked for. Maybe some internal folks have asked for a while. So we're going to get the code updated the best we can, and get it aligned and moving forward. So just communicating that to the board. We'll proceed. The first step there, you'll see March 3rd through the 23rd, we'll have a committee member solicitation. So just similar to like we do in the past, you'll see for those folks signed up for notifications, you'll receive notifications they'll come from Laura Burns in our office. And that'll be for folks who want to engage in the process and become possibly a committee member. And then we'll go into even, a code amendment proposal period, and just, standard kind of protocols that we see for code adoption. But this time it'll be for the OMDISC, and we're kind of crowbarring this in between the next iteration of the OSSC, which we're going to kick off pretty soon. So we're trying to get this one kind of fit in there. And update the OMDISC accordingly. And then the anticipated effective date is October 1 of this year. So it's a quick turnaround on this one. We don't have to deal with a lot of the publishing timelines that we have to deal with, when we're updating like the OSSC or OSSC and working through with ICC. And so with that, just a communication item, Mr. Chair, I'd be happy to answer any questions that the board may have.
Okay, do any of the board members have any questions?
Tony, this is Chris Wong. You mentioned crowbarring this in between the ORSC adoption. Is there a timeline for the ORSC adoption at this point, or not quite?
Not quite, Chris. Thank you for the question through the chair. Chris, we don't have a timeline for that yet, but we are working on that. And as you may recall from, many past iterations, we try to adopt the ORSC along with electrical and plumbing. So what you'll see in the plumbing board, and then also in the electrical and elevator board, is also kind of an announcement of their, code process beginning. But no, all of that will be worked through this board on the ORSC side. There'll be, notice for committee member solicitation, all of those pieces will come through this board. And I anticipate they'll probably overlap with some of this OMDISC process. So we'll try to keep it in its appropriate lanes the best we can.
Thanks. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, then we're going to move on to appeals. It says that we have no appeals. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, we'll move on to item 6 then. Unfinished business. It appears we have no unfinished business. That will take us to the next agenda item, which is new business. And we'll go to A. And Ian, would you take that, please?
Thank you, Chair Fry. Again, Ian Paik, analyst with the division. With this agenda item, the division requests the board review and approval of the division's proposed pathway for addressing stacked two-family dwellings and being connected to other stacked two-family dwellings. This rulemaking is considering using existing pathways in the 2023 ORSC section R302.3 to create a new path addressing stacked two-family dwellings being connected to other stacked two-family dwellings. The division held a rulemaking advisory committee on October 10th, 2024. The code solution is intended to meet the stated industry desire of simpler, smaller footprint apartment types designs being available, while the division supports our governor's housing initiatives and related statewide housing production goals. The approach is intended to accomplish this while still accommodating simple designs, easy to follow prescriptive provisions, flexible options, and reasonable levels of fire and life safety. Currently, the concept is to allow stacked two-family dwellings to be attached to other stacked two-family dwellings, or essentially zero lot line two-family dwellings with increased fire separation at the vertical demising walls between each stacked two-family dwelling. Chief Rocco is available for any technical assistance, and this agenda item will require a motion, examples of which are also included in your packet. Thank you.
Okay, does anyone have any questions?
If I could jump in here, Mr. Chairman, and just kind of provide a little overview for the board, if that'd be all right.
Yes,
Again, so
please.
thank you. Again, Tony Rocco with the division here. So I just wanted to provide a little bit of an overview of this approach and the attached stacked two-family dwelling kind of design kind of concept that we have. Also, what you don't see included in your packet, we received some suggestions from the city of Portland from Jody Orson. I see Jody is attending the meeting. Some good proposal suggestions, basically dealing with shared accessory spaces, also providing just some clarifications about the definition as far as access to adjoining public ways or yards. Some good cleanup stuff, so that we plan to incorporate those provisions or those suggestions into the language with some minor tweaks. And so that's the only part that you don't see reflected in your board packet. Were those suggestions from Jody and from the city of Portland. But basically what this is allowing is the townhouse product that we've all known here in Oregon, except now we can just stack units. We have 2 stacked units where we normally just have a townhouse separated from foundation to roof with a yard or public way on at least 2 sides. Now you can have two units. In each one, we're treating basically the same as we would a townhouse. So each one would be treated as a separate building. So you'd basically have a stacked two-family dwelling, and then you could attach it to another stacked two-family dwelling. If you follow the code path, we allow a total of 4 or 2 stacked two-family dwellings, a total of 4 units to be attached without the presence of a sprinkler system. And then once you get above that, so let's say land use allows you to have 4 of them attached, so you'd have 8 total units, 4 stacked two-family dwellings, then you'd have a sprinkler system. Once you get above that, 2 attached, 2 stacked two-family dwellings, stacked two-family dwellings. So once you get above that 4-unit threshold, then you are required to have a 13B system, which again provides a little bit of relief, right? Because if we get into that same type of profile under the OSSC for a group R2, you're talking about a 13R system. And so these provisions are pretty straightforward. We tried to make them simple. What we did is we took basically the IRC framework for townhouses, because they have a very straightforward kind of approach for the separation walls. And then we tried to address kind of each little, step or each little, design consideration that came up. We approached it as a team. And then, as I noted, the additions from Jody as well, incorporating those in for shared accessory spaces. And so, yeah, we have all the provisions there. Another thing to point out, just real quickly, is that we do get into the covered multifamily dwelling threshold, right? Because once we have 4 or more units in a single dwelling, in a single building, then we're getting into covered multifamily dwellings. So we have to have accessibility in accordance with the FHA. And so statute in 447-220 tells us to align with the FHA. And so we're going to have ground floor type B units. That's been a little bit of discussion during the rule, during the RAC for this concept. We talked a little bit about that, and there is going to probably be some training on that, because residential inspectors and residential plans examiners might not be familiar with type B units, but there is already a path in the residential code to getting type B unit design under the OSSC, and that would be if you had 4 or more attached townhouses, 1 or more of which is single story. Then we'd get into that single story unit being a type B unit. So there is already kind of that path, but there is probably going to be a little bit of a gap as far as the training goes. So we'll work with division staff. We'll work on taking that on, and maybe getting some additional materials out there for folks. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions about the concept, and I'm here to support the board. Thank you.
All right, are there any questions?
Yes, this is Chris Wong again. I do have a question. So when we do vote on the 3 motions, if we do vote to approve, you're saying then, Tony, that it will incorporate the public comments that you've received from City of Portland, and we wouldn't have to vote on the amend. So the 3 options was 1, approve as proposed, the amended one, or there's a disapprove one. Will we be voting on a amended approval? Is that the intent then, I guess?
Yeah, through the chair, great question, Chris. So Yeah, so the proposals came in, the suggestions came in. We didn't have enough time. I tried to scramble a little bit this morning, tried to put them together. So it would basically be the amended. So as amended, you could say as amended by division staff using the suggestions from, incorporating the suggestions from the city of Portland, or however you wanted to capture that. But I think it will reflect, I think, having this conversation on the record will reflect, what the intent was of the board, as far as what we're looking to include. And if you have any questions about that, I'm sure Ian can help out on the motion side as well. But thanks for that good question.
And then I did have a question regarding I liked what was written. It just seemed like there might have been a couple of things that may not have been considered the shared accessory space, like you had mentioned. But what about openings within the common wall or the 2-hour wall? And I didn't see anything sort of addressing whether it's prohibited or if there are like an opening, like an entry door that needs to be provided. How is that going to be addressed? That was one thing. And then the language itself within the right at the beginning, where it mentions the attached stack 2 family and the 302.3.3.3 mentions that each individual and stack 2 family shall comply with requirements of the 302.3 and the requirements for townhouses in this code. But then there's an exception later where it mentions if you attach the stack 2 family dwellings, then they are not required to comply with the R302.2, which is the townhome provision. So I'm just wondering, with that exception, does that or does that not cover? Are there elements that aren't covered then by the new code language that would have been covered by the townhouse provisions that are now sort of exempt? I just want to see if those bases were covered or not.
Yeah, great. Thanks,
Okay.
Chris. Yeah, through the chair. Again, Tony Rocco, the division. So a couple of questions. I'll try to unpack that, Chris. First, openings. No, there's no openings allowed in the separation walls. That's already addressed elsewhere, right? So we're cribbing this on to R302.3. So this is just 2 family dwellings. So we would deal with that through whatever approach you're taking, double walls or common walls. You could potentially have some, I guess, maybe some penetrations of like receptacle boxes and things like that. You also have with the language that you see there in R302.3.3.1.2 for the common walls. So there's an additional restriction. This was one of the questions, kind of curiosity questions that Jody had as well, as far as, what we allow historically in R302.2 for those, washer boxes. We have kind of these Oregon-owned kind of a allowance for membrane penetrations, right? And there's the old details that recently our team redrew and kind of added again there in the OSSC. So no, the intent is not to allow those types of penetrations within these separation walls, the vertical separation walls. There would not be an intent to allow those or to allow any unique type of openings. As far as front doors, I think you mentioned that. In my experience, those are going to be on kind of the front faces of the units and not going to be kind of horizontally, through a unit. But the intent would be to maintain that encapsulation of each unit, right? So horizontally, we're going to have a 1 hour, and then vertically, we're going to have that 2 hour, which is kind of the increased protection of these units, kind of going with that townhouse. And so if that satisfies kind of the first part of your question, the second part, it was a challenge for what we were trying to accomplish there. So what we talked about this in the rack a little bit is that we didn't want the Oregon only R302.2 language to be applicable to these, but we did want the rest of the language throughout the code, such as, there's some lateral bracing stuff for townhouses located in seismic C. So there's some all these other provisions that are attached to townhouses throughout the remainder of the code, and instead of going to each one of those instances and saying and stacked attached 2 family dwellings, we wanted to just basically say, okay, you have to meet all of the townhouse provisions in the remainder of the code except for those Oregon specific townhouse provisions in R302.2. So that's the intent there. I don't know if there's a better way to capture it. We talked about it quite a bit in the rack. You know, we talked about it on our team quite a bit. That was the best that we could come up with.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, are there any other questions? And I'd say, Chris, those were some really good questions. I can see you read your stuff and we appreciate that. All right, if there are no more questions, I would entertain a motion.
Would motion to, I'll get this correct, amend and approve the division's recommended pathway for addressing stacked two-family dwellings being connected to their stacked two-family dwellings and forward to administer for rulemaking and subsequent adoption, with the amendments being the ones that Tony spoke of the input being provided by the city of Portland.
Okay, I have a motion by Chris. Do I have a second?
I second the motion. This is, for the record, this is Board Member Sean Blair.
Okay. All right, any further conversation? No, if not,
Sorry, I guess, could you clarify what the amendments were again before we vote on this? It's a little awkward not having that in writing and voting on it.
Sure. So if I could, Mr. Chairman, I can jump in and kind of maybe add to Mr. Wong's motion just from a informational standpoint. Okay, so the proposed suggestions, they add, I'm just going to pull them up here. They add to the definition, they add and access to a yard, street, alley, or public way is provided on it, not less than 2 sides. So it's adding a little tag on to the definition that we know of for townhouses. So that was it there. It adds a new subsection addressing mixed occupancies that says mixed occupancies are not permitted within stacked two-family dwellings. Such buildings shall be designed and constructed in accordance with the requirements set forth for mixed occupancies or live-work units in the building code. So again, this is language that we know of for townhouses, but it's kind of just restating something that we would know to be the intent, but it's really helpful to the code reader to say that, no, you can't do mixed occupancies in these two-family dwellings. And then also addresses shared accessory rooms by basically inserting the 2024 IRC language for the same, under the same subsection, into a new subsection here. So it says shared accessory rooms shall be separated from each individual unit by, and then basically inserting the 2024 IRC language for shared accessory rooms of two-family dwellings. Hopefully that is helpful. Thank you.
okay, any other questions?
Thanks for that.
Okay, well, we have a motion and a second. Katie, would you call the roll, please?
Yes. Emily Kemper,
Yes. Approve.
perfect, thank you. Sean Blair,
Approved.
Chris Wong,
Approved.
Douglas Lethin,
Approved.
Jason Sawyers,
Approved.
Matthew Lutter,
Approved.
and Chair Rich Fry.
Approved. Okay, we're gonna move on to item B then. The low-rise residential provisions of the 2025 Oregon Structural Specialty Code. And Ian's gonna take that, but before we do, just for the record, if you have a question or a comment or something and you come on, would you state your name too, just so that everybody knows who it is and the record is clear then who was asking the questions or making motions? I appreciate that. Okay, and with that, I'll turn it over to Ian Panko.
Thank you, Chair Fry. Ian Pake, analyst of the division. With this agenda item, the Building Code Structures Board requests the board's review and approval of the low-rise residential provisions of the 2025 Oregon Structural Specialty Code and recommend the administrator proceed with rulemaking. The Building Code Structures Board at the board's October 9th, 2024 meeting approved the proposed 2025 OSSC, which includes low-rise residential provisions, and forwarded the proposed code provisions to the administrator for rulemaking and subsequent adoption. The BCSB recommends that the RMSB approve the proposed provisions that relate to low-rise residential dwellings. The board packet includes a document that summarizes the proposed code provisions that were approved by the BCSB pertaining to low-rise residential dwellings. Chief Rocco is also available for any technical assistance. This agenda item will require a motion, examples of which are also included in your agenda packet. Thank you.
Tony, did you have anything to add to that?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, Tony Rocco with the division for the record. So just to provide a little bit of background, oftentimes, we kind of run into this where we're looking at the low-rise provisions and the residential board members are kind of questioning, okay, what are we really looking at here? Okay, so we just made it through the OSSC adoption process through the Building Code Structures Board, and that's for the next iteration of the OSSC, so the 2025 iteration of that code. And this board, the Residential Manufactured Structures Board, maintains purview over all provisions that address low-rise dwellings. And that includes not just the ones that are covered by the scope of the ORSC, but it also includes those 3 stories or less apartments that we think of are 3-story walk-ups, right? So exterior door for each unit, 3 stories or less above grade plane. And so that's what these provisions represent. Kind of the missing piece between what we have in the promulgated ORSC and the OSSC. So all those other provisions for apartments. So these are the provisions from that process, the OSSC adoption process, that would impact those low-rise apartments. We're just kind of pointing out to you, we're going through all of them, showing you what the fiscal impact is, what the recommendation was from the committee, and then what the outcome was from the Building Code Structures Board. There's really nothing here that's very controversial, if I could say that. These are just identifying all of those low-rise provisions, and I'm happy to cover any of them in more detail. But again, these are the provisions that are going to be printed and promulgated in that next iteration of the OSSC. That becomes effective October 1 of this year, and then becomes mandatorily implemented statewide on April 1st of 2026. So happy to answer any questions. We can cover any of these in more detail if you'd like. There's a lot of information there. So, thank you.
Okay. Any questions either for Ian or for Tony? Okay. Hearing none, I would entertain a motion.
This is Chris Wong, board member. I motion that we approve the Building Code Structure Board's recommendation to adopt the proposed low-rise residential provisions and forward to the administrator for rulemaking and subsequent adoption.
Okay, do I have a second?
This is
Before you do that, Chair Fry,
I'm
Chris, we'll have to add the extra part of that memo, with the finding that the added costs in the help sheet.
Sorry. With the finding that the added costs, if any, is necessary to the health and safety of the occupants or the public, or necessary to conserve scarce resources.
Okay, thank you for keeping me in line.
This is Emily Kemper. I second.
Okay. Any further discussion before we take roll? Okay. Katie, would you call the roll, please?
Yes. Emily Kemper,
Approve.
Sean Blair,
Approved.
Chris Wong,
Approve.
Douglas Lethin,
Approve.
Jason Sawyers,
Approved.
Matthew Lutter,
Approved.
and Chair Rich Fry.
I approve also.
Perfect. The vote was unanimous.
Then takes us on to C, the mechanical board's recommendations regarding the low-rise residential provisions of the 2025 Oregon Mechanical Specialty Code. Ian, would you take that, please?
Thank you, Chair Fry. Similar to the last one, Ian Pake, analyst with the division. With this agenda item, the mechanical board requests the board's review and approval of the low-rise residential provisions of the 2025 Oregon Mechanical Specialty Code and recommend the administrator proceed with rulemaking. The mechanical board at the board's October 22nd, 2024 meeting approved the proposed 2025 OMSC, which includes low-rise residential and ventilation provisions, and forwarded the proposed code provisions to the administrator for rulemaking and subsequent adoption. The mechanical board recommends the RMSB approve the proposed provisions that relate to low-rise residential and ventilation provisions. The board packet includes a document that summarizes the proposed residential code provisions that were approved by the mechanical board pertaining to low-rise residential and ventilation. Chief Rocco is also available for any technical assistance. Similarly, this agenda will require a motion, examples of which are included in your agenda packet. Thank you.
Okay, does anybody have any questions of Ian? Okay, if not, Tony, do you have anything to add?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, Tony Rocco with the division. So this one similarly, this was just the same identical kind of concept here, but through the mechanical board. And we have our mechanical chief, Mark Heizer, here, and he can address any of the questions that the board members may have. Thank you.
Okay, any questions for Tony? All right, then I would entertain a motion.
This is Matt Lutter, board member. I move to approve the mechanical board's recommendation to adopt the proposed low-rise residential and ventilation provisions and forward to the administrator for rulemaking and subsequent adoption with the finding that the added cost, if any, is necessary to the health and safety of the occupants or the public or necessary to conserve scarce resources.
Very good. Thank you, Matt. Do I have a second?
Yeah, this is board member Sean Blair. I'll second the motion for Matt.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any questions?
So question, what, if any additional cost, what is that cost?
Tony, can you take that?
Yeah, if I can here, through the chair, Mr. Chairman, again, Tony Rocco with the division. I think Mark Heizer could speak to that. We do have a column, in the board packet there that talks about the fiscal. And these are fiscal findings made by the committee and then formalized by the finding made by the mechanical board as well. Mark, could you speak to maybe just kind of the approximate costs that the committee and maybe the mechanical board spoke about?
Yes, if we could bring up the matrix one more time. There is one item that does have a potential fiscal impact, and you will see under section 403 from the fourth item down from the International Mechanical Code, there was a revision that increased the minimum ventilation requirement for apartments. Part of the calculation for the air exchange rate for outdoor air for apartments had a number based partially on the floor area. The multiplier for the floor area increased from 0.1 to 0.3. It could run as high as change the sizing of the fans that might be required to provide mechanical ventilation for apartments has increased. For about 1,000 square foot apartment, it may go up about the equivalent of about a 60% increase in ventilation rate. The cost could be anywhere from $0 to as much as $800 per apartment, depending on the size. That was the one fiscal item that would affect areas covered by this board. was increasing the ventilation rate, which came through the model codes. And I'd be happy to take any questions. Thank you again. Identifying myself, Mark Heizer with the division.
Thank you, Mark. Any other questions? All right, we have a motion and a second. Katie, would you call the roll, please?
Yes. Emily Kemper.
Approve.
Thank you. Sean Blair.
Approved.
Thank you. Chris Wong.
Approved.
Douglas Lethin.
I'm going to disapprove, and I know $800 doesn't seem like a lot, but as we're tasked with trying to consider cost as far as building costs to people, I'm going to disapprove.
Okay, thank you. Jason Sawyers.
Approve.
Matthew Lutter.
Approve.
Chair Rich Fry.
Actually, I'm going to disapprove also, and for the same reasons, the cost with SDCs and everything else, the way they are on apartments now, and the costs they're almost getting to be prohibitive. So, and we need the housing. So, that's my vote, and that's it. Thank you.
For the voting stands, we have 5 yeses and 2 nays.
All right, that brings us to the announcements then. Do any board members want to make any announcements before we adjourn? No? Right, well, then, first of all, I'd just like to say thank you to everybody for putting up with me today and helping me get through this. So hopefully it'll be a little smoother next time. And with that, we are adjourned for the being no further business on January 8, 2025, Residential Manufactured Structures Board meeting is adjourned at exactly 10:15. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Good job, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Good job, Chair Fry. Thank you.